finally, I'd like to introduce Harold Kleinert. He doesn't want me to read his bio in here, but he has a very impressive bio that you can read in your folders. He's from University of Kentucky, right? Are you still there? Okay. University of Kentucky, and I came to get connected with him through my dear friend Stephanie Meredith, who is the one who put together the flyers, what are they called? The brochures about Jacobsen syndrome for newly diagnosed parents who receive new diagnoses. And so, and I'll show those a little bit more on Thursday, but Harold works with Stephanie, and so he helped with the research that that we did. I think you may remember about a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, we sent out questionnaires, and so he's going to talk about a little bit about that and also about transitioning into adulthood. So I'll give the time to you.
Thanks, Lindsay. My name is Harold Kleinert. I am new to Jacobsen syndrome. I am not new to developmental disabilities. I actually started teaching in 1969, which means I've been doing this for about 49 years. And I don't think that I've ever had a student who had Jacobsen, but I've been absolutely fascinated by your conference and by the sharing and the things that are coming out of here, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be part of this. Can everybody hear me? I have a tendency either to yell into the microphone or to be so soft that people don't know what I'm saying. There's really two parts to this. The first part I want to share with you, give back to you for all those families who participated in our psychosocial research, give back to you the results of what you said. And it's not going to surprise you about what life is like living with a family member who has Jacobsen syndrome. The second part is to talk a little bit about transition and readiness for adulthood and hopefully a vision for employment. First of all, it's not a surprise that more and more families are getting a diagnosis prenatally, especially with the advent of cell-free DNA prenatal screening. And as a result, families are wanting to know, or prospective parents are wanting to know, what is life like? And we actually started in our work with the National Center for Prenatal and Postnatal Resources, we actually started looking at this for children who have Down syndrome. And then we began to also look at Turner syndrome and now Jacobsen syndrome. We really wanted to get a sense of what do families say. Because one of the most important things, if you receive a prenatal diagnosis or a diagnosis after birth, well, tell me, what is my life going to be like? And so our research questions were, what can we tell? What can we tell newly diagnosed families of children with Jacobsen syndrome about what they might expect in their lives? And what are the psychosocial outcomes for families? Our method, we essentially did an online survey. Many of you participated. We designed an instrument very, very similar to that of Dr. Brian Skotko at University of Massachusetts, Boston, and Harvard. And it really was an instrument to get at parents' perceptions of family life. We had a total of, we sent it out to the 11Q research and resource group. Approximately 1,000 parents, as you well know, are on that listserv. We got 104 responses. That's about what you'd expect from an online study. 99 of those responses answered almost all the questions, or almost all the questions. 91% were the mother, and that's pretty much what you also find, is mothers tend to respond more than dads. The majority were married. 14% reported being separated or divorced. Almost all reported that they were living with their son or daughter with Jacobsen syndrome. The majority lived in the United States, but nearly 30% lived in other countries. very educated sample. 63% had completed a bachelor's degree. That's, but the children themselves were relatively young. Over 50% of the children whose parents responded to the survey were under 10 years of age, and less than 20% were 20 years or older. So we had a skewed sample to younger children. And as you might expect, because Jacobsen syndrome impacts girls more than boys, we had a higher percentage of parents who reported that their child was a daughter. Now, I don't know if you can see this. I'm going to send to Lindsay. I actually have the research study and I should have made this available, but I realize these slides are probably very difficult to see. But I'll send it to Lindsay, that study, so she can send it out if anybody wants to have it. For the N, this reflects the number of parents who answered the questions, and the percentage agrees. It was a 7-point Likert scale. So if you answered 5, 6, or 7, you were considered to be in agreement. And the median on a 7-point scale, you can see, for the first one, I'm proud of my son or daughter with Jacobsen syndrome. 97% agreed with that. I love my son or daughter 100%, and it was almost a perfect set of 7s on that. I enjoy spending time with my son or daughter, 98%. Overwhelmingly, and this is not going to surprise you one bit, very, very positive perceptions on the part of parents. Parents also felt that their son or daughter's life could be very challenging, 78%. But even though they said that, they also said, I feel my outlook on life is more positive because of my son or daughter with Jacobsen syndrome, 79%. A significant minority, and just listening to stories this morning, I can certainly understand this, felt that their life with their son or daughter with Jacobsen syndrome was more overwhelming than they could handle, and that about 42% expressed that their son or daughter was at least sometimes frustrated. However, even given that level of frustration and challenge, 96% indicated that my child with Jacobsen syndrome has a happy life, which means you can obviously have a happy and a challenging life at the same time. So this is simply a summary of what I'm not going to read it back to you. It's just a summary of what I've just said. Parent perceptions of impact, that was parent perceptions of their own relationship to their son or daughter. Impact on family and the community. The vast majority, 80%, said their son or daughter with Jacobsen syndrome had a good relationship with their other son or daughter. And this is interesting, 70% even indicated that my other children are more caring and sensitive to others because of my son or daughter with Jacobsen syndrome. I've spent many, many, many years working with children and adults with Down syndrome, and I've seen that same phenomena in the lives of families of children with Down syndrome. And it was very interesting to see this very same thing with families of children with Jacobsen syndrome, that it actually contributed to a sense of caring in family life. Comfortable answering my other children's questions. Now, interestingly, we were trying to get a sense to what extent parents saw that having a child with Jacobsen syndrome put a stress on their marriage or partnership. Well, 21% said that it did. And with a mean of 1.79. However, 17% said that their other children were putting a stress on the relationship. So not a heck of a lot of difference there at all. Now, what did parents say that they learned? What are the life lessons that they've had from parenting their child? Almost all said personal self-growth. 97% had learned patience, 94% acceptance, Look at the percentages for love and joy, 96 and 95 respectively. Lessons on blessing, faith, and God. Now, that was lower, but that was simply, did having a child with Jacobsen syndrome teach you lessons about God? And some generally agree, but not nearly at the same level. Interestingly enough, when we broke that item down by whether or not you were from the U.S. or international community, that was significantly higher in the U.S. community. And it might simply be a greater importance put upon religion and faith experiences in the United States compared to Europe. I don't know. Do not take anything for granted, 97%. Kindness and empathy, perseverance, all 96, 98%. Learning how to advocate, a really critical skill. And I heard parents talk about that over and over again today, 96%. Well, one of the things we wanted to know, well, does it make a difference how significant the challenges your son or daughter has? Now, we didn't break it down. We didn't break the perceptions down into level of intellectual disability, but we looked at the extent to which parents indicated their child had severe health problems versus not having severe health problems. And 40 parents, 40 respondents indicated their child had a significant health problem. Now, these numbers are way too small to see, but essentially what they reflect is that there was no difference in terms of parent perceptions, in terms of how you viewed the quality of your child's life on the basis of whether or not your child had serious health challenges or not. And in fact, the only differences we found when we looked at all of that, we found a couple of differences that were in favor of families who reported their children had severe health challenges. They scored higher in patience, doesn't surprise me, and not taking anything for granted. The blue lines reflect parents whose children did not, parents who reported their children did not have severe health problems. Orange did, and you can see there are some items where the actually were higher if you reported your child has significant health problems. The thing there though is that level of severity does not seem to change people's perception of how they value their life with their son or daughter. Key findings: significant majority felt their child had a happy life. Smaller majority, but still a majority, agree their child was very challenging. But, and this is very important, the life of challenges does not preclude a life of happiness, pride, and love. And in fact, you can almost argue that a life that does not have challenges is not necessarily going to be a life of happiness. Advice for new parents. This is the 100 parents who responded, including, I'm sure, many people in this room. Their advice for new parents, and we put this in our booklet, Understanding a Jacobsen Syndrome Diagnosis. Learn to be positive, 98%. And identify support groups and resources, obviously such as this one. One mother noted their 11Q family research and resources support group has been supportive and most helpful in this journey. From our perspective, and we entered into this looking at trying to ensure that new and expectant parents got accurate and balanced information about what life was like. From our perspective, for new and expectant parents receiving a prenatal or postnatal diagnosis, they would likely benefit from referrals to patient advocacy groups. And I don't have to tell you, this is the major group for this condition in the world. Information about positive life outcomes and referrals to support services and networks. Okay. Any question? That's the first part. Just wanted to share with you, and I don't know if you even if you already remember doing this survey, but I basically wanted to share with you what we found. And if you want a copy of the results, I'll send them to Lindsay, and she can send them out on the listserv, okay? Not a Mac user.
All right, so it's this one now? Yeah. Okay.
Oh, that's wrong. Oh, I'm sorry, Paul, I just hit the wrong one. I thought that was,
that the wrong?
yeah,
You want the other one then?
yeah.
This one.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, the second part is, okay, what happens when children grow up? One of the issues with our sample is that, as I said, over half of our sample of families and had children less than 10 years of age, and less than 20% had children or young adults 20 years of age or older. So what about preparing for life transitions? And you may have noticed that these slides have Kentucky Works. The reason they have Kentucky Works is that this is a curriculum that we are developing for families to increase expectations about what is possible for their son or daughter who have intellectual or developmental disabilities. This is a federal grant that we have in Kentucky. Stephanie and I have been working on this. But the information I'm going to share with you is information that is generic to all states in our country, and so that's why it has Kentucky Works on it. The first thing that I think is absolutely crucial, and the other thing I just want to say real quickly is that I don't have information, I don't know of studies that have looked at transition and employment just specifically for youth and young adults with Jacobsen syndrome. I do know a tremendous amount of work that has been done in the area of transition and employment for youth with developmental disabilities and intellectual disabilities in general, and those studies can clearly be applied to help us think about futures for your sons and daughters as well, okay? The age-old question, what do you want to be when you grow up? Every child deserves to develop their talents and follow their dreams. And a crucial thing that I think that we want to set high expectations for children from a very young age. Make employment the goal at a young age. That doesn't mean you send your son or daughter out at the age of 4 or 5 into a job, but it means that you have that expectation that work is possible. One of the key things in whether or not individuals, youth with intellectual and developmental disabilities become employed, in fact, are family expectations. What do families hold as their vision for their son or daughter? I would hold that it should be, and this can be a challenge for, this can be challenging, but it should be, the vision should be integrated competitive employment. It could be full or part-time. You know, a number of individuals who work part-time, or they work 2 part-time jobs, or could even be self-employment. It could be with or without supports. But it should be in the competitive labor force. It should be on the payroll of a regular employer, and at least minimum wages and benefits. It can look differently for different individuals. It should be flexible and customized according to the individual's needs. may look different for each person. And it can also be different hours of work. Not everybody has to work 8 hours in a row. Not everybody has to work 8 hours 5 days a week. The value of work is simply this. You know, when we first meet somebody, the first question they may ask us is, well, what do you do? What's your job? Okay? It gives us a sense of worth. It allows us to develop and contribute. All individuals have things to contribute in this world. It allows us to develop social connections, relationships. Earn money. It's a big deal. Have independence. One mom at the session earlier was talking about her daughter now moving out of the house and living in her own place. And it also gives us a regular expectation of adulthood. This is what is expected as we become adults. And so start with a vision of employment from kindergarten. What do you want to be when you grow up? That also can mean starting each IEP meeting with a vision of the future. Now, if your child is 5 or 6, it doesn't mean, well, my son or daughter wants to be a so-and-so when they grow up. But we can talk about visions of what may be possible. And starting an IEP meeting with a vision of the future really sets the stage that while my child is 7 or 9 or 11 or 14, they are working towards something. Obviously, when you're talking about elementary age kids, you're talking about a parent-led IEP meeting. But increasingly, we're advocating that students themselves develop an active voice, that they become the leaders of their own IEPs as they middle school and high school. And in fact, we have very strong, solid research which would suggest that students that are able to set their own goals and take an active role in their own education have higher post-school outcomes, more likely to be employed. One of the ways we can do this is with a vision statement. And I was looking around the room and all the wonderful posters that families had assembled about their son or daughter. And a vision statement is very similar to that. But the importance of a vision statement, and you bring this with you to an IEP meeting, it talks about what are my child's strengths. And you can talk about that at 6 or 7. And I heard one parent talking about, well, all I hear about is, here's all of my child's deficits. No, list, here are my child's strengths. Also put what works for your child, what doesn't work, and what the child is working on. Okay, and bring it with you to the IEP meeting, setting an expectation early on that your child will achieve at the highest level for him or her. For an adolescent, and this is Stephanie's son, Andy, developed his own vision statement. And this is the importance of students developing a voice of themselves. That after I talk, you get a much better thing. You get a panel of young adults talking, and that is absolutely crucial because youth advocating for themselves is one of the most powerful strategies we have for developing better outcomes. And if you look at in Andy's vision statement, he wants to go to college and have a girlfriend. He wants to live on his own without his parents. He wants to have lots of friends and work at a good job. He works at Publix now, that's a grocery store. And I also want to be a photographer and work at the YMCA. I have a lot of dreams and ideas. Ask me. Okay? And students can take their own vision statements with your support to their IEP meeting, setting higher goals for themselves. The other thing that we have found makes a difference in terms of outcomes for students with developmental disabilities is inclusion in the least restrictive setting, is participating to the maximum extent possible in a general education classroom. Now, the law since 1975 has said exactly the same thing, that students with disabilities should not be removed from a general education classroom unless the severity of the child's needs are such the child's needs cannot be met in a regular ed setting, even with modifications. It didn't say that the child has to be working on the same goals as everybody else. And it also didn't say that you can just throw kids in there, even with program modifications. Those have to be provided, okay? And the benefits of participating in a general ed setting, the opportunity to observe peers. We all learn by watching others. We learn to get along with our peers, and social interaction skills. One of the most crucial reasons why individuals with developmental disabilities lose jobs is because they don't necessarily have the social skills that are required. Learning as much independence as possible. Teaching peers to expect that children with intellectual and developmental disabilities are part of their world and can work alongside them. That's one of the most powerful arguments for inclusion, because the peers are the future physicians, they're the future teachers, they're the future employers, they're the future neighbors. And so that participation in general education classroom can prepare not only your son or daughter, but can also prepare their peers who will be living with them, hopefully in this world for a long time to come. Building relationships, friendships, establish friendships. Okay? Now, how many people are here from other countries? Okay. What country? Pardon? Okay, yes. You have a special education law, I think. Yes. Where else? Pardon? Ireland has a special education law. I know you do. I know it's probably not exactly like ours, but as many kind of. Where else? Brazil. I don't know. Brazil has a tremendous soccer team. No. No. I don't know about Brazil, but at any rate, what I'm going to share with you are special ed laws around transition in this country. There are similar provisions in Ireland. There are similar provisions in New Zealand and Australia. And I hope there are similar provisions in Brazil, and that's just my own ignorance. But in this country, and this is one of the reasons to set high expectations from an early age. In this country, we have to have, beginning with the IEP in effect on the student's 16th birthday, we must have measurable post-secondary goals. What does that mean? That means it's a statement of what your son or daughter hopes to be doing when school is over. It also has to include transition services needed to reach those goals. Now, here's some examples. Lauren will enroll in a community college and will pursue coursework in early child care. Juan will work 30 hours per week at a medical office doing clerical and other filing responsibilities. Those may or may not be appropriate for your son or daughter, but the whole point is they're supposed to be individualized. Measurable also means we can tell at a glance whether or not they're being achieved. It should be meaningful. It shouldn't be trivial. It shouldn't be, well, they're going to go spend their days doing, at so-and-so center or whatever. It should be meaningful things that they are contributing, realistically achievable as well. Along with that, this is U.S. law, but in U.S. law, starting at age 16, there should be measurable annual goals that support these long-term goals. So they should relate to the student's post-school goals, need to address both education and training, as well as independent living if applicable. So, and I've heard some really good examples of kids developing independent living skills this morning. And transition needs to include work, education and training, independent living if applicable. Required transition services. Transition services, well, here's some, okay, I'm getting ahead of myself. Measurable annual goals. Okay, here's a student who really wanted to work with young children. So she was going to have at least 2 community work experiences in her high school career in child care. Hector verbally identify the accommodation supports he needs to each of his content area teachers in preparation for doing this in college. One of the things, if your son or daughter is looking to go to college, there are no IEPs in college, obviously. There are no IEPs in college. Students can have accommodations in college, but they have to advocate for them themselves. So that's a really crucial skill to be learning. Here's an independent living goal. Lauren will set up her own checking account, debit card at the local bank and learn to use that card, make purchases. I don't know if I would have trusted my own daughter doing that, but in addition to post-school goals and measurable goals, in this country require transition services. And transition services can include specially designed instruction, related services, assistive technology, all to help your son or daughter achieve their post-school goal. Specially designed instruction can be in the classroom, but it can also be in the community. It could be job training. I was a high school teacher for many years with students with developmental disabilities. And all the students had opportunities to do job training. The other thing is I wanted this comment real quickly. Heard a mom said this morning that if she felt when her daughter, I think got to be 16 or 17, the opportunity for learning academic skills didn't quite seem to be there, or at least not as much as, de-emphasized, and it was much more towards vocational. And yes, vocational is really important, but there should be a balance. And if, for example, if you look at Lauren's goal, checking account, debit card requires academic skills, requires math skills. You shouldn't stop you should not stop learning academic skills just because you're preparing for transition. And balancing academic and life skills is a crucial function of schools. Related services. I heard a number of families talk about, one of the issues that their son or daughter may have had was fine motor skills. And occupational therapy. You think about occupational therapy being provided in the classroom, but it can, if it's part of transition services, it can also be provided to assist the student in learning how to do a job or how to arrange the job so that it's set up in the best possible fashion, or speech-language services that enable to ensure the student has the expressive language skills in order to request all of the things and use the job vocabulary that he or she needs to use. And assistive technology, and it can be like video, printed picture schedules, video-based schedules, many step-by-step kinds of things, iPods that explain the job steps, things of all those sorts of things. But the point is, transition services to reach the goals can be special designed instruction, can be related services, and can also be assistive technology. Okay, here are some things to know. For kids under 14, prepare for work with household and family chores. Look at what their brothers and sisters are doing. You may have to modify it slightly, but all children should be expected to do things around the house. Make sure that school transition conversation starts at age 14. Now, nationally, and I don't know about New Zealand and Ireland, but nationally, the law requires in this country age 16. Many states require formal transition planning to begin at 14. What does Georgia do? 14, okay. By age 16, make sure there's an employment goal in your son or daughter's IEP. Make sure there are annual goals related to your son or daughter's post-school employment goal, and seek help if you have questions. Other things you can do: encourage participation in extracurricular activities. Many parents don't realize that part of least restrictive environment, part of the IEP, should also be the consideration of the extent to which the child can participate in school extracurricular activities. When we look back at our own high school experience, many of us remember not trigonometry, not chemistry, not for senior English. We remember extracurricular activities, and all students should have the right to participate in those without modifications. Okay? Look at other kinds of activities: dance, sports teams, things that in the community. Consider extracurricular activities, school teams for your son or daughter's IEP. And I'm not talking about being on the football team or the basketball team. I'm talking about other kinds of things, or intramurals that kids could be involved with. Recreation programs, scouts, and faith-based groups. Many families have indicated that opportunities for their son or daughters to be involved in the community has come from their own church, synagogue, or other faith-based group. Okay? Preparing for work at home. Talk about the value of work and different kinds of jobs. Not necessarily when your kid is 3, but certainly as your child gets into later elementary and middle school, you can talk about what different jobs are and what people do. Complement and cultivate skills and talents of your son or daughter. Ask about interest and potential jobs. You know, what are some things? What are things that your child is especially good at? How could that perhaps translate into a job? Explore different kinds of careers. Read about books. Read books about employment. Look at, are there opportunities for volunteer work in your community as your son or daughter gets to be transition age? Maybe there are food drives, church events, nursing homes, things of that sort that their school is doing, or that scouts are doing, or that the church is doing. And that opportunity to contribute can give you ideas about things your son or daughter may be good at, and be in itself preparation for employment. Volunteering is not employment, but volunteering is community service, and it's preparation for employment. And how many of us started out, not necessarily in a real job, but volunteering in the summer and things of that, and learning about work that way? What does your child like to do? How can you develop that talent and skill? And how could that perhaps at some point be shaped into an employment interest? Developing soft skills. Soft skills for youth and adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities is one of the key reasons, or the lack of soft skills, why individuals lose jobs. And there are some excellent programs, Skills to Pay the Bills, online. And I've indicated a couple of them for you right there. Also, and then we don't have really a great deal of time to go into this, but think about what are your own greatest fears about employment for your son or daughter. Common fears: vulnerability. I worry about my son or daughter being taken advantage of. Disruption in services. Well, but if they go to work, maybe they won't get so-and-so service that they're getting right now. Transportation could be a biggie. How do you get to work? Availability of appropriate supports. Your son or daughter may need assistance, may need ongoing support in terms of a job, may have some behavioral challenges, may have, and how can those be built in? Putting it all together, losing benefits. That's a huge issue. If your son or daughter receives SSI and perhaps along with that, government health insurance, losing benefits can be a huge concern that parents have. That said, if your son or daughter receives SSI, in almost all cases, your son or daughter is better off working than not working. First $85 that you earn is not deducted. Okay, after that, for every $2 you earn, you lose $1 of SSI. You still hold your medical card up to the level, whatever your state, and I don't know about New Zealand and Ireland, I'm sorry, but whatever your state's Medicaid threshold is. In Kentucky, it's $30,000 a year. Okay, so in other words, the fear of losing benefits, well, it's a very real fear. Getting with the benefits counselor and talking about this can help you realize that your son or daughter is almost, I'm going to say, I can't ever imagine it, but almost always better off working. We have actually developed a module, and you can go to it. It's absolutely free, no cost, and all of that. And it's the module actually is called Benefits 101, and you can literally plug in different amounts that your son or daughter might make, and you can see the impact it would have on your SSI. Okay, so it's a. I think I went past it. There it is. And that's the address of it. It teaches you how to do the math, and can help you. And if the fear of losing benefits is a real fear for you, this can help you understand that. Always, though, you want to work with a benefits counselor, say through vocational rehabilitation. Available resources. We also have several things available on our in Kentucky Works, and we really built this for families. So we have a module that really looks at, what are the effective practices? What are the things that really make a difference as to whether or not your son or daughter is going to be employed? And there are some other resources, and you have these. Okay? Then there's one other thing that is relatively new that you may not know about, and that's the Workforce Innovation and Opportunities Act, or WIOA. That's actually reauthorization of vocational rehabilitation. And the people in Brazil and New Zealand and Ireland, I don't know what your counterpart legislation is like, but essentially, the Workforce Innovation and Opportunities Act, or WIOA, mandates or provides the opportunity for students to receive, students with IEPs or 504 plans, and I would imagine that would include all transition age students who have Jacobsen syndrome. It provides the opportunities for students to receive job exploration counseling, work-based learning, including on-the-job training, readiness training, including independent living skills, post-secondary counseling. You say, well, my son or daughter has an intellectual disability, they're not going to college. There are now, if you go to the www.thinkcollege.net, there are now 269 colleges in the country that are offering programs for students with intellectual disabilities. Some students with Jacobsen syndrome may go on to college and just as a regular degree student. Others may want to pursue the opportunities of going to one of these 270 programs throughout the country. There are other programs around the world as well, so it's not just the United States. And then the other pre-employment transition service or pre-ETS service is instructional and self-advocacy. And that essentially is teaching students how to advocate for themselves, financial readiness, literacy, those sorts of things, skills that they really need to live in the world. Okay? Who's eligible for this? Well, this is something that you need to know. Your son or daughter would be eligible for this if they meet 3 criteria. They're in an education program, like a public school program. They're between the ages of 14 and 21, and they're eligible for and receiving special ed or related services under IDEA, our Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or Section 504, the rehab, Section 504, which is a student who has a 504 plan. They could, this is not a paid advertisement, but if a good source of information about opportunities and programs for your son or daughter in terms of work, you can get by visiting our own website, Kentucky Works. It's what we did was try to, and Stephanie really put this together, was really build a set of national resources. And you can type in what you're looking for, and it'll filter those resources based on your own individual needs. And because her own son has an intellectual disability, she developed a youth section that's accessible. And it has audio and visual aids, 3rd grade reading level, and Pinterest-style resource descriptions. In other words, really set so that individuals can themselves explore employment opportunities. Okay, and that's just our webpage. Now, there's a whole bunch of other resources, PACER, the skills to pay the bills resources and things that I think are worthwhile to look at. But the major thing I just wanted you to be thinking of, if you have a young child, set a vision early. Consider building one of those vision charts. Start the IEP with it. If you have an older student, a middle school student, a high school student, have them help develop that vision statement, and start the IEP with it. Make sure there are transition goals and services on your son or daughter's IEP. It doesn't mean you have to give up academics. There should be a balance to that. Make sure there are opportunities for your son or daughter to be included in activities with other kids, okay? Questions? I left exactly 5 minutes.
I have a question about setting goals in terms of asking kids what they want to be when they grow up. So if I asked my daughter Sydney what she wanted to be, she could say astronaut or doctor, and with her, I don't think those are practical ideas for her. So how do you talk to kids about what's practical but also matches up with what they feel passionate about and what they really want to do?
That's a really good question. You really want to guide kids into realistic, achievable things. But sometimes you can say, well, what is it about being a doctor that you oh, I like to wear a white coat, or I like to have this, and it may well be that there are other things that work working in a hospital that is, your daughter might be able to, that your daughter may be able to do. It's not necessarily that specific profession, but there typically are things that kind of go along with it, and you drill down a little bit. Not always, but sometimes you can come up with, oh, okay, I want to be a veterinarian. Well, you really like animals. Okay, what are some other possibilities there? Now, I don't know about astronaut. I have to think about that one. I don't know the answer to that one. Okay. Yes.
In my case, it's the opposite. I asked him what he wants to be, and he said nothing. How you establish or set goals when you don't have, I know what he can do, but I don't want to set goals thinking about me. I want to set the goals about him, what I know, what he likes to do.
Well, that's the first question. Well, what do you like to do? What are the things that you or just observe? What do you see it's your son?
Yes.
Okay, how old is he?
He's 19.
19. Okay, what is it that he really enjoys doing? Are there things that he's really good at that could translate into a job? And sometimes it's not always obvious. Is he still in school?
Yes.
Okay.
But that's another thing. He's in a private school.
Yeah.
We don't go by the regular transition,
Yeah.
Public system. And it's kind of hard. Also, I live in Florida. We don't have that many programs over there for adulthood. So we are working probably establishing program with the school, to get them to work in a cafeteria or find, some community services. But it's really hard for me, transition to adulthood, it's been the difficult part of this whole journey.
Yeah. Is the private school working on transition?
We are working on transition.
Okay. Has he been involved like in any volunteer or service activities like at the school or things?
Well, at church, he does some stuff. I try to keep him involved in extracurricular activities like sports, through Special Olympics. He's in the swimming team. I try to keep him busy.
Yeah.
But, I don't want him to reach 21 and have him at home. I don't want that for him because
Yeah.
I know he needs that other part.
Yeah. Yeah. And I spent many years as a public school teacher, so I'm always think in terms of the public school requirements. And I also realize that more families are now moving towards, or at least families that I know, looking at private schools and things of that sort. And so it's harder to figure that part out. But one thing I would say, have you linked him up with vocational rehabilitation in Florida?
No, I try to do that.
What were you
But-
told?
I think he's really, his intellectual and learning disability is really severe. And I didn't, I thought that he was not ready for that at that time. We're going to work on that hopefully this year, try to get, vocational rehabilitation involved,
Yeah.
and trying to get that because I think now he's a little bit more conscious, probably I would say that, or more, I can talk more with him, but to his severity, it's kind of hard to, I don't know what to, it's like that unknown thing.
Yeah, in 19, it's you just have two. Does he still stay in school till 21?
Yes.
Okay, so you have 2 years. And I do understand that voc rehab sometimes will not, and it varies from state to state, but will say, fear your son or daughter disability is too severe, even though they're supposed to be working with individuals with the most severe disabilities. But I know one parent was kind of looking, okay, what is the possibility of things that my son or daughter could do? Well, they actually got involved in Meals on Wheels, delivering Meals on Wheels. Now, does your, and another thing, we could talk about this afterwards, but do you receive like any waiver services?
No, not yet.
Okay, all right.
They
So,
are-
oh, yeah, let's talk about it after. Okay,
Okay.
but yeah, that's a hard situation. If you're not receiving waiver services, they're
Because they say
yeah.
this after, when he turns 22, he will start receiving the waiver.
Okay,
Well, at least in Florida. I don't know in any
okay,
other.
okay, but not till he's 22.
He's in the list.
Okay.
They have a huge waiting
Okay.
list. So
Okay, will there be a gap between leaving school and the waiver services?
I don't know.
Yeah, that's one of the key things. That's one of the key things I would ask. And then waiver services in most states typically include supported employment services. Supported employment services are designed with something called discovery process, where you try to figure out, okay, what is the person's interest, what are their gifts, what are their skills, and how could this translate into a job? But what you don't want is a gap between your son leaving school at 21 and then waiting
So
for waiver service.
when is the good time to avoid that gap, for me to push that?
I would be applying right now for I would be checking with whoever in your state, the State Developmental Disability Agency that runs waiver services. Say, my son is going to be leaving school in June of 2020. Okay, I want to make sure that he's able to access these services. Okay, and so that as soon as school is out, those waiver services kick in.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Yes.
Mine's actually more of a comment than a question. For starters, I just wanted to thank you so much for this information. My daughter's only 8, but you've given me a lot to think about, and so I want to just thank you for that. And secondly, thank you so much for the information that you provided at the beginning of your presentation, because when we got our diagnosis, all we saw was negative, horrible stuff about all these things that could be wrong and be horrible, and we just got this just horrible, overwhelming sense of grief. And I think that the information that you provided from the survey can really definitely give hope to people who've gotten new diagnoses. So I want to thank you for
Well,
that.
thank you. Yeah, and we started because my own experience, my own family member had Down syndrome, and Stephanie's son had Down syndrome. And that's where we started, but we realized that prenatal diagnoses are across the board in terms of conditions and things, and you're absolutely right. People get no information, or they get worse than no information. Okay, and so that's and the only reason we got that is because of all the people, all the families who were willing to participate and share that with us. So we owe that to you all. Okay. Well, I went over. Oh, my shirt. Thank you. Oh, excellent. Okay, thank you.
Oh, and we have a bottle of wine for you also. There you go, thank you.